All right, so I'm not really a public speaker. I'm not a teacher or anything like that, so if I get a little jittery, just bear with me. Um, so I just want to let you know a little bit about me. I'm 20 years old. I am currently studying graphic design at Pikes Peak Community College, and I have a huge obsession with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, it's probably not healthy. Um, but the reason I'm speaking to you today is because Brandon asked me to give you my testimony and to talk a bit about hope and where we can find true hope. I come from a very fortunate background. If you didn't know me and you were to take a look at my life from the outside, you might think it looked, pretty perfect. God blessed me with a wonderful, loving mother, a compassionate father, and a great, but most of the time annoying little brother. Interestingly enough, I recently had these facts thrown at me by someone insinuating that I didn't know what it's like to suffer. Like somehow because I had all these wonderful things, I couldn't know how it feels to be lonely or to feel left behind. I found that this is a problem with today's society. If we are blessed with good things in our lives, or we have something someone else may not have, we are expected to be perfectly happy and have no struggles. You may have found that with, other people. They say, oh, you're so beautiful, you couldn't possibly have these problems that I'm facing. But in our world, we place our hope in our possessions, in a good job, in our friends, and a lot of times in a boyfriend or girlfriend. We place our hope in things. But I can honestly say from experience that when the going gets tough, these things aren't going to hold up. When things get difficult and we really are truly struggling, we're going to find those things that we put our hope in will ultimately fail us. To someone, or maybe even some of you, when I described my life, it may have seemed like I don't really know what I'm talking about when it comes to pain and suffering. But when I was 16, my mother passed away. She had cancer for the second time, and while we knew the inevitable was coming, I truly thought she was going to get better. So when she did finally pass, it hit me like a ton of bricks times 10. I was overcome with grief and the stress of having to fill her shoes and take over her responsibilities. I knew my dad would take care of us, but at the same time, I knew he was struggling with all the same things that I was, so it really, really scared me. I had friends that couldn't handle what I was going through, and so they pulled away. They couldn't deal with it, and so they just thought it'd be better if they stepped back. It was an all-encompassing disaster that took over my life, and the things I once placed my hope in became unreliable. I spent the next few years trying so hard to find hope in anything but God. I felt like he had abandoned me, that he had failed me, and I was just so angry. So I was determined not to let him back into my life. I looked for hope in boyfriends, in best friends, and even in the illusion of my own mental strength. I thought I could face it all on my own. And I slowly began falling into depression, anxiety, and self-loathing. I didn't care about my life whatsoever. It was hands down the darkest period of my life. I was beginning to blame myself for the things that went wrong. If something didn't work out right, I was a failure. If a guy didn't like me back, it was because I scared him away. Maybe I was too ugly, too overweight, too intense. I couldn't be loved, and I didn't deserve love. And I was at the point where I didn't care if I lived or died. I got so low, and I reached the point where I couldn't take it anymore, and I gave up on the fact that I was ever going to be normal again. I gave up on the fact that the me that was there before my mom passed away was gone. I was tired of the constant disappointments of people letting me down and the things in my life falling through. I had been continuously shown that I couldn't trust people and it was starting to wreak havoc on my own self-image and self-worth. So I gave up on trying to get back to any sense of normality. I'd fully accepted that the old me was gone. The girl with the passion for creativity, the love for music, and the unshakable faith wasn't ever coming back, and I was going to be stuck as an empty shell of what I used to be for the rest of my life. And I know this isn't, I'm not the only one who's experienced this. Maybe you have experienced this as well. But what I want to say is God didn't give up on me, and he hasn't given up on you. He was still there, just waiting for me to come back to him. One day when I was driving home from the store, I was just filled with so much anger. Anger had replaced most of the emotions that I experienced at this point, so it wasn't really anything new. But that day was particularly bad. For some reason, I decided to turn on the Christian radio station just to fill the air with anything other than my thoughts. And it just so happened that they were playing the song Tell Your Heart to Beat Again by Danny Goki. I don't know if you guys have heard that. It's officially my favorite song. Yeah, you get it. There's a line in the song where he says, "Words fall short in times like these, when this world drives you to your knees. You think you're never going to get back to the you that used to be." And it all hit me at once, because it was like God was telling my heart that he wasn't going to let me go that easily. He was speaking to me and reassuring me all these things that I've been feeling for a year and a half to 2 years. I just began sobbing, and I realized how bad I'd truly become and how badly I needed God in my life. At this point, I just cried out to him, and I said, "I need you." And back he came. After years of me turning my back on him, he was just as willing to help me now as he had been from the beginning. Feeling that new hope of unending and unconditional love was like being brought back from the dead. I started putting my hope in his word again, and I tried to redirect my life in the way that he wanted me to go. There's one verse in particular that had always given me peace that I would repeat to myself. It's John 16:33. "I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world." That's Jesus talking to his disciples. My newfound faith wasn't easy. Fully giving my trust and hope was a slow and deliberate process. After so many times of being let down by other things and avoiding God, retraining my mind to turn to him and cast my anxiety on him was difficult. It was almost like I wanted to keep the stress to myself because I still thought that I could deal with it on my own. There were many times I would neglect my relationship with God and I would fall back into my old habits. But when I was consistent and when I gave the effort to give him the control over my life and my mind, the change began to take effect, and I could not be more grateful. I slowly began to love myself again. I saw my beauty no longer through the comparison to other women, but through the eyes of the one who created me. I saw my personality quirks not as something to hide from others, but as defining qualities that God gave me so that I could give back to the world. Don't get me wrong, I still deal with anxiety, but at this point it's no longer crippling. Like the verse that I read to you said, "In this world we will have trouble, but God has overcome the world and those troubles." He has power over them, like Brandon was talking about authority, or Pastor Jeff was talking about authority. He has authority over any problem that we could face if we just give it over to him. This obviously doesn't mean I always feel completely okay. I still have really bad days, but I have hope knowing that I've given it to God and that he's taking care of me. But one thing I've learned is being able to look at yourself and at the world through the eyes of the perfect and unadulterated love of God really changes your perspective. You start to not only see your own worth, but the worth of everything and everyone around you. You realize that everything that God has created is good, and it's meant to be loved, including you. God created you with a purpose in mind, and he created you to be you. And once you allow yourself to see that beauty, life with God truly becomes worth living. You are loved, you are worth it, and you matter because God says you do.